So I'm going to start off with the visual style used in Call of Duty World War II. Do you think that the game is more abstract, or alternatively, photorealistic? From the gameplay that you can see on your screen right now, do you think that the game is more photorealistic in the sense that you can't notice any differences from real war? Or do you think it's more abstract and so you can't even recognise anything from real life? Abstract in a video game can be to do with the proportions. For example, if someone has a gigantic head and only has little legs, then the game is more than likely abstract because of the proportions that have been used. Alternatively, if the game shares many similarities with reality, then it is more than likely photorealistic. I'll give you a second to watch the gameplay on screen now, and think to yourself, is the game photorealistic or abstract?
Paul, it's June 6, 1944. Wish you could see this, brother. We're invading some frog beach I'm not supposed to even know the name of. Also, we can take back France from the Nazis.
I would say that Call of Duty World War II is heavily in favour of photorealistic. This is because of the many similarities you can see from the gameplay to real life. This is important, especially for this game, because it is attempting to give an accurate representation of the Second World War. The narrative of the game is simply representing the Second World War. It is shown through both the campaign and the multiplayer. The campaign is the most accurate representation of the war, as you fight as an ally against Nazi Germany, with real life situations and locations being used, such as the Normandy beach. This is also used in a map called Neptune, which is a war map within multiplayer. The way that this time period and story is employed into the game is simply through the amount of depth that the developers over at Sledgehammer Games have gone into with every aspect, making sure it is as accurate to the World War as possible. I would also say that the narrative structure used in Call of Duty World War II is linear. This is because it has a very set out structure. This structure is also used in a variety of other Call of Duty games in the past. It has a very clear beginning, middle, and end. The beginning being the start of the war, the middle being a huge obstacle and the point where there is the most tension in the war, and then finally the climax, when we overcome Nazi Germany. There is another narrative structure, but I don't feel like this suits Call of Duty World War II very well. This is called non-linear. This essentially jumps around time periods a lot, and this doesn't suit the game as Call of Duty World War II's campaign is set in chronological order, going through each battle as they were in the war, in order.
Keep moving! Daniel! On me!
Now I will be discussing the interaction models. This is essentially who you play as in the game. You play as a soldier, and you are essentially either an ally or a Nazi, or as the multiplayer likes to call it, a member of the Axis team. So basically, your character is a soldier who has the same capabilities as everyone else in the game. Not one character is faster, and there isn't a character who has more health. It is a complete even playing field. The only thing that is different is the visual aspect, what you look like. You can alter this and essentially choose what your character looks like to an extent. You have preset faces which let you pick between a male or female character with a variety of skin complexions. This character customization is only available within the multiplayer and not the campaign. The reason that Sledgehammer Games has chosen to do this is because they want to tell their story of a soldier which they have already planned out. They also want the player to embark on a journey which will be immersive, instead of the player messing about with character customization. You don't even get to pick what guns you have in the campaign sometimes. You just have to pick them up from fallen enemies.
Now pick up that banger!
Now I am going to be discussing the perspective used within Call of Duty World War II. The game takes place in the first person format. This is the case across all three modes within Call of Duty World War II: campaign, multiplayer, and Nazi zombies. There is however a social space called headquarters within the multiplayer mode, which does take place in the third person. You can do things which are called emotes, and these are little actions that your player does, and being in third person allows you to see your emotes better, and everyone else around you so much easier. You cannot shoot when you are in the third person because it takes away from the immersion aspect. So when you move from the standard area of the headquarters into the firing range, for example, you get put into the first person. It is very important that all the combat does remain within the first person, because it means that the game remains immersive. Let's talk about the game world in Call of Duty World War II, starting with the terrain. Now the terrain is like the natural land which is used in the game. It's not man-made, no buildings, just like the simple terrain, like the mountains and the hills, or like something like the Normandy beach, for example. Also, dirt and grass makes up a lot of the terrain which is in the game, and also snow, which can be seen within the Ardennes forest map, which you've seen throughout this video. This map is covered in snow, and it's an accurate representation of the actual battle which took place in this exact same location. Here is a couple examples of the terrain, taken from Ardennes Forest and the headquarters. Now moving on to the architecture which is used within Call of Duty World War II. There is a wide variety of architecture used across all three modes. This ranges from small things such as cabins, to big things such as vast pillars and bunkers. As well as the architecture in the game being very realistic, it is designed in such a way that it works well with the level design for multiplayer maps, and provides both sides with enough cover. Once again, here is a short clip of just some of the architecture used within just one map. Lastly, we will look into the objects used in World War II. This could be a wide variety of things, from just furniture to like coats hanging up on the wall, which you'll see in a minute. Here's a great example of this, taken from the bunker in Ardennes Forest. You can see a desk with various objects on it, and then you go around the side and it's just a whole room furnished. This is very important in the game because it just shows how realistic they're trying to make it. They're trying to make it feel like people were there and it's an actual setting of a battle. There are three main types of feedback in video games: visual, physical and auditory. First we'll be talking about visual. Visual comes in the form of things such as tags in Kill Confirm, for example, whereby you can look at your menu, find out what the tags are and judge where the enemies are, or also hit markers to judge whether or not you're actually hitting the enemy. This is very important in COD because you need to know if you've hit the enemy or not, and then make decisions based on that. Another form of feedback in the game comes from physical vibration in the form of the controller vibrating. This is simply done by a button press. When you press the shoot button, your controller will vibrate, and when a grenade goes off nearby you, it will explode and your controller will vibrate even more. This adds immersion to the game, however this mode can be turned off. The last form of feedback that you receive is through audio. Now this is done in a variety of different ways, from a button press just to ambience music in the background. Now just listen to this background music which is used in Call of Duty World War II. Another form of audio feedback is through the gunshot sounds. This is expected in the game and it is very much so needed. An alternative way that audio could be used in Call of Duty is by listening out for footsteps. Hear an enemy, pre in the corner, and 9 times out of 10 you'll get the kill. It's all about this awareness in game and using this feedback to your advantage. One thing that I think Call of Duty World War II could be missing out on is a dynamic AI. What I mean by this is something similar to Alien Isolation, where the AI will get smarter and smarter depending on how good you're doing, and then adapt to you, making the game more fun. The mechanics in the game are to do with what the player does and the feedback that they get from doing this. For example, one of the main mechanics in Call of Duty World War II is the dolphin dive. I'm sure you're all aware of the dolphin dive. Mechanics can be seen in 4 simple steps, these being input, model, feedback and mastery. The input is simply the buttons you press to perform this action. The model is then the computer calculating what is happening. Then the feedback is what actually happens. And then finally, mastery is you mastering that mechanic and then expanding on that and becoming better and better with it. You might be thinking, where does the fun come from? Well, check this quote out. The fun comes from the mastery process. Getting better and better at this and having an advantage over your opponents is just so rewarding. Addictiveness in video games is very, very important nowadays. To get your players coming back each and every day on your game is very important. Now let's talk about why Call of Duty may be so addictive. One of the reasons is probably the prestige system. Ranking up with all your friends and getting loot along the way through ranking up, and also just earning guns at different ranks is so rewarding, and it makes you want to keep coming back and playing. Also, the little icon you get for prestiging is just bragging rights in the lobby because everyone knows what level you are. Supply drops are essentially crates which have new and exciting loot in every time. You can see on screen how cool they are. They come down in front of everyone in the social space, which is headquarters. Everyone can see this and earn social score, which will essentially give them XP. Getting these supply drops is so rewarding, and it gets you wanting to come back and earn more and more gear for your character. There is, however, a negative side to these supply drops though, because it could be seen as gambling because you can now purchase these with real money. There is a debate whether or not this is actually gambling though, because you do still get loot out of it, so you essentially can't lose. This quotation on screen now shows the amount of money that they can actually make out of these supply drops, and as long as they can keep getting away with it, I'm sure they're going to continue. Cutscenes are not only seen in the campaign of the game. There is a short cutscene at the start of every game of war which is in multiplayer. The campaign shows off a mixture between pre-rendered CGI cutscenes and live-rendered scripted cutscenes. It is important that you get the right balance of these, because you can go from a live rendered video with minimal movement to then giving the player their gun up and they're straight into the battle, and this works perfectly.